What's up, YouTube? How's everybody doing? Hope you had a wonderful week so far. We're going to have a awesome weekend of college football
Yep.
that lies ahead. Starting actually, I guess already, obviously, we joked last week. It's pretty much an all-week affair,
Yep.
5 days a week now, the schedule-wise. But especially interesting game on this Friday with, my Buffs, Colorado playing. But jokes aside, allegiances aside, really looking forward to this weekend. Some really interesting games that I think we're going to be able to learn a lot from and really kind of steer the course for a lot of teams. Week 7, second episode, really, of the preview. Third episode, I guess, ever. But yeah, let's get into it, Con. First segment, as always, let's get into your questions.
Yeah, before we get into my questions, I just want to correct one thing you said.
Okay.
Not starting tonight with the Buffs, starting
Oh, yeah.
last night with one of the wildest games I've ever seen in my life. We won't talk too much about it because we're not previewing it. Obviously, it's already happened.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
man, that Houston Hail Mary
Oh,
after
my
West
God.
Virginia scores with, what was it, like 15 seconds left? It was more than that, I know, but under a
Yeah.
minute.
It was enough to confuse me where I wasn't, necessarily locked into that because of other games, other sporting events, so we say, but it was just I kept seeing on the timeline back and forth, just oh my god, best like bad beat, and then I couldn't tell what was really going on with who was on what side and what happened, but that was unbelievable. Donovan Smith just chucking that up there, and then you just look. It's like in the I guess kind of law of large numbers type deal in both college and the NFL. Maybe you look at them together in kind of one kind of universe. There's always, I guess you can count maybe a couple every year that just rip the hearts out of
Yeah.
another team and just completely euphoric for the other team that's able to convert it. But yeah, what a game for Houston. Shout out to get their first Big 12 win too, which is a
Yeah.
big milestone.
So congrats to
But
the Cougs.
yeah,
Just had to bring that up to correct you
yeah,
real quick.
no, yeah, no, it's fair enough, fair enough,
But
very
we will
notable for
get
sure.
into now this week's Connor's question.
Hmm.
And our Connor's question of this week was every single year we see at the end of the year teams back in the mix at the end that we'd kind of forgotten about, that we kind of threw away after an early loss.
Hmm.
Perhaps the best example of this was the 2015 Ohio State Buckeyes, college football playoff, all of that. They lost week 2 to to Virginia Tech, I should say, and
True.
they were out of the rankings for a while. People had forgotten about them, and all of a sudden they come storming back. And it seems like every year there's at least one of those teams. So I posed the question to you last night. I don't know your list yet.
Hmm.
Who are your top 5 candidates this year to be the bounce back team of the season? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win the college football playoff,
Hmm.
but just a team that all of a sudden in November, December, we're going to be talking about them going, oh, I almost kind of forgot about them because I just wrote them off too early.
Sure. And I guess my definition, maybe it's obviously eye of the beholder and it's each their own, and maybe how we qualify the degree, obviously, of a bounce back, right? I mean, I guess there's a certain range or variance inherently with that question, but to give a little bit of a precursor, I have three teams from one conference, and then we have some ranked teams in my list. We have an unranked team in my list. Starting, I'll keep it interesting. I'll go for this, especially this type of top five. I think it makes sense to go from five down to one.
I think so as
Last
well.
time it was
We
kind
did
of
1-5
known,
last time,
and
but
and that was kind of more of a set in stone, like
yep.
who's the best team. We both agree Georgia and Michigan are kind of in a little bit of a tier right now.
Hmm.
So for the build up, for the anticipation, we'll go 5-1 traditional reveal, so to speak. At my 5 slot,
Okay.
I have UCLA.
All right.
Now, interesting choice. I know people are going to say, well, they're the 15th, in and around the 15th best team in the country right now, ranking wise. For me, they've fallen a little bit out of obviously the Washington, Oregon, USC, Washington State, Oregon State. There's just so many Pac-12 teams that have, had really good seasons so far and performed at high levels. I think UCLA is kind of forgotten about a little bit up until obviously they just got a big win
Hmm.
against Wazoo, against the Cougs there. But they had a brutal showing against Utah, which benefit of the doubt, tough place to play. Just offense just didn't even look like
Hmm.
an offense. And for a Chip Kelly team, you just expect so much more. But then again, Dante Moore, freshman quarterback. And I think freshman quarterback, they're going to have their highs and lows kind of over the course of the season. And look, they have a very good defense, best edge rusher in the country, and
Yep.
just try to get some pronunciation redemption here. It's almost spelled the same first last name, but it's really the slight deviation in his first name. I believe it's Latu, little bit different. So I just want to give him the respect that he's due as one of the best, if not the best, edge rusher in the country right now, playing at such a high level. The reason I say UCLA Con too, one of the main primary reasons within that conference of death, the Pac-12 is, they really don't have the most, conference of death schedule remaining within the Pac-12, relatively speaking. So I think they can really kind of little run the table, like stack some wins and wins and wins to the point where I think they could be a bordering kind of top 10 team come the end of the season. And the primary reason I say this is because, we think about the schedule, conference play really heating up, and best match, I think, obviously, this weekend, we have two Pac-12 teams in Oregon and Washington.
Yep.
UCLA doesn't have to play either of them. They've somehow dodged, those are the teams they've dodged from a scheduling point of view, whereas Washington State and Oregon State both still have to play Oregon and Washington. So the UCLA is number 5 team. Any initial gut reaction, or I'll just move on to number 4 if you don't, but
Yeah, I didn't have them on my list,
Okay.
and we'll get to my list after this. But I think you made a strong case, especially factoring in what's left on the schedule. The one
Yeah.
place I'll push back a little bit is they don't have Oregon and Washington. Still, as we talk about every week, seemingly the
Yeah.
entire Pac-12 is a gauntlet, and
No,
you can
yeah, it
lose
is.
any week in the Pac-12.
No, for sure.
But no, I like your reasoning there.
And I think they're just rounding out UCLA here. The marquee game they do have, I mean, outside obviously big game this weekend,
Yep,
going up
huge
to I
game
guess
this weekend.
Corvallis, in Oregon State. But assuming they can maybe manage through that and eke out a win there, then they have USC left on the schedule. But USC, I kind of feel favorable, like they match up pretty well against USC, to be honest. But anyway, that's my number 5 team for the bounce back. I will go now. So 4, I am going a little bit east. I mean, can't really go much far west anyway. I guess Hawaii is really the only team we could be talking about. But I'm going to the Big Ten. I'm going with Wisconsin. I know we've talked about them a little bit already over the last week or so. I think the timing, when we talk about bounce back, and especially you stress, an early season loss, right? That kind of derails maybe the trajectory or kind of suppresses maybe the relevance or how much they get talked about, right?
Yep.
And I think that was the case with Wisconsin losing to Washington State. We know we've talked about obviously great team that they played. Just really early season losses, especially within the first couple 2-3 weeks, really can obviously suppress kind of your relevance and your ranking,
Yeah.
and I think public perception, because look, there's so many teams that are going to be 2-0, 3-0, and now though they're slowly I think climbing back into really some I guess not to be redundant, but the relevancy of okay, out there in the Big Ten West, I think they have absolutely that inside track, and look, they have a solid defense, and they're one of the best rushing attacks, obviously, like it is every year, time and time again. Doesn't matter who. I feel like you or I could just be like the offensive coordinator or the head coach. We'd be able to. Wisconsin just runs the football, and I think that's a play style that kind of transcends, any. It can show up each and every weekend,
Yep.
to put it bluntly, and I think they can, make some noise. I don't necessarily like, Big Ten title chances, but I like their chances to get, or I should clarify, I like their chances to get to that big game. And even if they just, against either a Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, even if they play it close, in which I think their style can kind of lend to that, I think Wisconsin as a bounce back team for me, I think ultimately they're going to, I think, be firmly at come into the year a top 20 team, quite honestly. And I think it's going to be a good, all in all, first year under Fickle, if I had to guess. So.
Yeah, and that's another good point. I said not every team we're going to talk about is going to be a national championship contender, which I think we both agree they're firmly not, no matter what happens the rest of this year.
Yeah.
But if they could go 10-2 in the regular season, make it to that Big Ten championship game, and even no matter what happens in that game, that's a really nice season under a first-year head coach.
Oh, totally. And I think it's definitely, like, yeah, so much to your point. There's so much to then be able to build momentum, and who knows, maybe next year. I mean, because we're seeing. I mean, look, even if you don't have the greatest first season, on the job, just any positives that you can take with you. You never know how much that's going to help you come next season. I mean, look at, it's still early. I'll knock on wood for the sake of Sooner fans, but Oklahoma,
Yeah.
after a pretty mediocre first season under a head coach, I mean, a lot can go right, I guess is the way to put it, with, a new program, a new culture, and kind of just, stepping stone building, building success. So Wisconsin's my number 4 team. Getting into now my top 3 bounce back candidates here. And notice, I guess I started by saying a little hint: 3 teams are all in the same conference.
Yep.
None of the 2 teams I've mentioned are part of that 3. So
Yep.
we have 3 teams
Wow.
now that are in the SEC that I've chosen as my bounce back teams. Is it some bias? Yes, I guess. You can definitely say it's some bias from me being an SEC guy with, South Carolina here. And, maybe just this eternal just, oh, well, South Carolina, maybe we're not having the best year of our seasons, but we're playing the SEC. So I feel like maybe I just give so much respect, more respect than that what's really due. But that's just me. That's my bias. But when I ultimately do think about who can bounce back,
Yep.
I think starting with now this number 3, I got to actually go in the SEC East. I think, look, Tennessee, because I don't think, look, even with, no Hendon Hooker, no Jalen Hyatt, some turnover
Yeah.
to put it bluntly and simply on the offensive side of the ball, which was so, such a potent top 5 CFP bound team it looked like for such
Yeah.
a large part of last season. Even without those, without some of their juggernauts they had on offense this year, I think people would have expected Tennessee to beat Florida, point blank. Florida's just
Everyone expected it. Yeah.
Florida is simply, and I don't have too much room to talk, so we'll see what happens this weekend too when South Carolina goes down to Gainesville. But I think truly, when I think of bounce back, it was a bad loss for Tennessee to suffer against Florida. It really just embarrassing, to be honest, in the fashion that they did. But I think, look, we're up to 19 now in terms of the top 25, kind of getting back into the fold here. I think Milton's not the worst quarterback. I think he's a fine college quarterback. I think, look, with Heupel, that's where I kind of lend a lot of my confidence, I guess, too, and ability to bounce back. Really, I think a one-loss team. Obviously, Georgia's going to be the ultimate test, and we've seen, even though obviously I rank Georgia as my number 1 team, I think in the country, they've shown some vulnerability, and
They
I
have
think Tennessee's
certainly.
going to be the best. Tennessee very well give them the best, run for their money. I think
Hmm.
that they're going to see this season, and Tennessee, I think ultimately I can see them, stacking up some wins and momentum to the point where they're right in and around that top 10 to 15 range when it's come season end and they're in a competitive bowl game. And all in all, I think a solid season, all things considered, all the success they had last season, just to, compared to where we were with Tennessee after that Florida game. I mean, I think they're firmly one of my bounce back candidates. Initial reaction to that. What do you think?
Yeah. They're a team I thought about here. I don't have them on my list,
Okay.
and the reason is the schedule ahead is just such a gauntlet. I could see them
Yeah.
losing 4 games this season, which wouldn't be a bounce back from losing one early.
Sure. Sure.
It's just a brutal schedule they have. I mean, the entire SEC is brutal, but I do think they took a pretty significant step back on the offensive side of the ball. Jalen Hyatt, tongue twisted there,
Yep.
but he was a great college receiver, and I think it's pretty clear they're missing him right now. And then I think the drop off from Hendon Hooker to Joe Milton is more exaggerated than people give it credit for, because Milton has so many tools. He's such an NFL scout's, like, they're all in love with him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People kind of forget that play on the field is what's important in the game. And Hendon Hooker, while he maybe didn't have all the tools that Joe Milton does, his play on the field was excellent. Milton's has been shaky. Although I do
Fair.
have to shout them out real quick. Squirrel White, maybe the best name in the NCAA.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure, 100%. And they have had some injuries to that wide receiver core though too, which
Yeah.
definitely can create some problems, for sure the rest of the season. I don't know. I just have some feeling with Tennessee that they're kind of stacking some momentum here, and obviously you got Georgia on the schedule. You know, other like you said, SEC is not a easy conference, even in a down, relatively speaking, year.
Yeah.
No easy games. I mean, Kirby Smart said it after seemingly every game this season to try to cover his bases, the form that he hasn't really showed so strongly until last week against Kentucky. But as you predicted. But Tennessee, it's really for me I see the opportunity and what they've done in response to their loss against Florida within that SEC East. I just see them, I'm not calling them to overtake and, come out of the SEC East by any stretch. I just think they deserve some bounce back respect. And I think I would wager that they'd end up being a top 20 team when this ranking is all said and done with this season.
And they'll have their spots to prove that. So we'll get to see it play out.
And I think, I guess I'm holding on to that hope that they do show up in several of these games, and especially this weekend. So we'll get into that later when we preview this weekend's slate. But all right, so that was the only SEC East team I have. So the other two are going to be two out west, and I think starting at 2, I'm going to go with the Crimson Tide, and I think it's relative. We're talking a bordering top 10 team right now in the country. They've never really, deviated too much outside that top 10, even after that loss against Texas early in the season. And really, it almost felt like with how we expect the expectations that Bama constantly warrants season to season, it felt like with how the quarterback struggles, obviously, to start the early part of the season, it felt like honestly Bama was like a 2 or 3 loss team with just how badly and how much of a deviation it was in terms of that drop off at that position, and then just struggling against the likes of USF, right? It really, the perception, it seems like, oh my God, Bama was just worst season they've ever had. But I don't know about that. I think we have some opportunity for them to come out of the SEC West for sure and maybe make some noise.
And I think some people might hear this and go, what are you talking about? Nobody threw Bama in the trash. Nobody forgot about Bama. I would push back against those people. It's easy to forget how, shortly ago, there were literally people going on, nationally syndicated television and radio programs saying the Nick Saban era is done. It's over. The dynasty's dead.
True.
And now
Last
all of a
season
sudden,
is done,
now all of a sudden, it's like, oh, Bama's this one loss team that they're probably going to make it in. So
it
just takes a couple weeks. One big win at A&M and everybody flips back to Bama's the juggernaut. But you're right, they were totally, by a lot of people, discounted and thrown away and said there's no chance that they do anything this season.
Which, hindsight's 2020, but definitely a bit of an overreaction. But I think with just it's to some degree you could have seen par for the course in the sense that they're just such a, blue blood powerhouse team that the expectations are just so high. Top 4 team, right? Preseason ranking wise. So it's like, oh my God, barely scraping the top 10. Like, oh my God, it's like you're saying, like a very sky is falling reactionary, take on that was very commonplace throughout the media.
Certainly.
And I think they have a very good opportunity to get to the SEC title game, and who knows what happens. Stranger things have happened, in championship games, and you can never look. There's been a little bit of a change in course over the last couple seasons or so, but Saban versus a assistant, maybe Saban reminds everybody in a potential title game, he's the kind of the godfather who is of smart, and we'll see. I just think they have to be given their respect as a bounce back candidate in my book, as the second best bounce back candidate. So
give me number 1.
That leaves the one and only LSU as my number 1 bounce back team. And is it some bias? Yes. Again, I am a relative fan of LSU. What this is kind of predicated on is how bad, obviously, first game of the season couldn't have really gone worse for LSU. They get absolutely kind of stomped by FSU in a very disappointing game from a Tiger perspective. And then they lose to in my view, not the greatest Ole Miss team.
Mm-hmm.
Defense again exposed, and defense sort of exposed again last week as well. Look, I just think LSU are not dead yet. In my book, they have a route, albeit a difficult, very difficult route that lies ahead to potentially getting out of the SEC West. And I think what is important to note, it's a little bit of a tinfoil hat here, I will say, but going through kind of the schedule, going through my own kind of RPI, FPI, bracketology, they obviously they suffered the loss to Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss, though, obviously lost to Bama, which anyone could have predicted.
Yep.
So they already have the one loss in the conference. I see Ole Miss very likely to get a second loss because they play Georgia. Mm-hmm. So that kind of knocks Ole Miss out because obviously there's the head-to-head dynamic. Mm-hmm. So Ole Miss is out of it, and it comes down to really Alabama, LSU for who's coming out of the West. And look, we're talking a team that's, kind of barely inside the top 25 in LSU, but I just think that offense, Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, there is too much firepower where they can, I think, go against any defense, to be honest. It's then a question of, okay, can your defense just give you anything, And I think my thinking kind of leans, I should say. It can't really get much worse. It can't get much worse. So I think it's only room for improvement from a defensive perspective, and I just believe in their offense kind of as good as or as much as anybody in the country. So
you heard it here first, folks. Their defense is so bad it can't get any worse, which is why they're a good team.
Yeah, exactly. They're being suppressed because of how bad their defense is in the rankings. I think, look, they have a chance. And I guess ultimately it's if you ask Tiger fans and maybe SEC fans, if they, cracking back into the top 10 of the rankings, maybe, if they do end up losing a game to Bama, obviously coming up, if they're a 3-loss team, that's obviously a very bad season or below expectations. Mm-hmm. But in my book, they can still salvage a season that would be on par with expectations and very much a bounce back season compared to the 2 early losses that they've already suffered. Call me crazy. We'll see week by week here with LSU, but that's just my number one. I know it's a hot take. But...
All right, so before I get into my list, just one question.
Okay.
Where are we on the the goal to get LSU to be the first ever 2-loss team into the college football playoff? Well, give me a percentage on it. What % chance?
I think, look, in my head, I keep running the regressions and the possibilities. I think we're sitting at a 4.8% chance, which is still, so you're telling me there's a chance. That's still a good chance in my book. We'll see. I just think so much can happen. Although I actually was just thinking about this, right earlier before we started the show. I think if I had to maybe predict a relatively moderate scenario for LSU, like in terms of like a somewhat maybe this, what I think is maybe the second or maybe not the most likely scenario for LSU, but I think a very possible scenario for LSU though would be, to your point, what you just asked with the college football playoff % chance of being the first ever 2-loss team. What I could see though, honestly, is they stack some wins, beat Bama, and they do go undefeated, so they end up being a 2-loss team. They get to the SEC championship game. Mm-hmm. They squeak by Georgia, but at that point in time, let's say they're the 9th or 10th team ranking-wise going into the SEC championship game, mm-hmm. and they eke by Georgia. Even in the event they do win, I could see them going up to 5 and not quite getting into that fourth spot, depending on what
Have,
else happens.
have you
But
been spending a lot of time on Ancestry.com recently? You didn't let me know that Colin Kelly is related to Brian Kelly. Is that what's going on here?
no, we don't. I 18th cousinth removed on my great side, but no, I don't claim Brian Kelly. I don't really like Brian Kelly, honestly, as a coach. I just believe in LSU. I know it sounds kind of crazy. It doesn't really make sense what I'm saying, but I believe in LSU and the program that they are and the players on offense that they have. I just think I think they're my number one bounce back team here. We'll see. I might be eating crow or whatever phrase we want to use very shortly. But that's just my number one bounce back team. Con, let's get into yours.
That is a man with conviction, folks.
It is. That is correct.
All right. So I will also go 5 down.
Yeah, sounds good.
I left myself an option. It's like
Okay.
like an RPO here at the number 5 spot.
Okay, sure.
I can decide which way to go.
Okay.
And I will go with Kansas, number 5.
I considered them. Okay. I like that call.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, not a ton to say other than they lost bad, but they lost bad in a game without their best player on the field. They lost to Texas, who is obviously a very good team.
Oh yeah.
Other than that, they've looked really good every week. They're coming off their best season that I can remember last year. It wasn't even that great of a season. That's just how bad the program's been. So they're clearly trending in the right direction. They're winning some big games. We've talked a lot about how the Big 12 is a two-horse race. Obviously, already with the loss to Texas, you don't see them winning the Big 12, but they're going to be up near the top of it at the end of the season.
Sure.
And up near the top of the Big 12 could very easily be up somewhere in that top 20 range in the country.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a team that there was some preseason hype about. Get their doors blown off by Texas, and everyone forgets about them.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, in 2, 3, 5 weeks, we could be looking, going, "Wow, Kansas is 8-1."
Sure.
So that's who I have there. At number 4, I have Duke.
Also, I thought about Duke as well. They have quite a schedule remaining within the ACC. In the ACC, it's been a up year for the ACC as well. But yeah, they were very much in my top 5 consideration. But glad I didn't say it, so you can give your take on why.
Well, as we talked about last week, they were one play away from beating Notre Dame. That's how close that game was.
Yep.
They've looked really good. They beat up on Clemson week 1. Now maybe it doesn't look like as big of a deal as it was at the time, but still, week 1, Duke playing Clemson, the recent history at least of those two programs, that's huge.
Oh yeah.
And to do it in the fashion they did it, and I know they're a little injury bitten right now, but I think as long as they can stay afloat, they have the opportunities coming up on their schedule to win the ACC still.
Yeah.
That's not off the table.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Not at all. And I think they're one of those. They're ranked still. They're 17 in the country, I believe, this week.
Yeah, that's about right.
But they are a team that almost no one was talking about until the Notre Dame game. It was like, oh, nice win against Clemson, good for Duke, but they're gonna fall off. They didn't. They play a really close, really big Notre Dame game, and now again this week, I haven't heard a peep about them. Probably won't for another couple weeks because they're Duke football, and everyone's just kind of. They're easy to throw in the trash after a loss. Mm-hmm. They're easy to be like, it's Duke again,
Yeah.
But I think this Duke team is different. I think Mike Elko's a hell of a head coach. He's going to get a really big job next year if he wants one.
Yeah, I think they're already. If they hadn't, I might have to fact check this. If they hadn't already recently or currently in talks to get him into a good extension, because he is seemingly the next in line to be like a top coach at a top. Maybe Pac-12, SEC, or not Pac-12 anymore, but SEC, Big Ten, next big-time job. He looks like bound for that right on the inside track there with anybody.
Yeah. That's, I don't want to spend forever on Duke, but I think they're still a very good team. I think there's a good chance at the end of the season we're going, wow, look at that season from Duke.
Fair enough, yeah.
At number 3, I have a team that you mentioned, so I won't talk too long about them, but I've got Alabama. Same thing as we talked about. It was like, the sky is falling. The Saban era's over. Mm-hmm. They're not a power anymore. They're just another good SEC team. They're not a cut above. And now, clearly, they're right back in the spot to go to the SEC title game,
Hmm.
maybe win it, maybe even still be like the 1 seed in the college football playoff. And
There's a chance. There is a
yeah.
chance. Yep.
So, yeah, I think just for the possibility of what they could do, they deserve a top 3 spot.
Hmm.
Number 2, you also mentioned, so I won't spend too much time
Okay.
on. I had Wisconsin number 2.
Okay.
Same thing. I think it's the most classic bounce back thing ever. Ton of preseason hype. Lose week 2 to an unranked team at the time, who
Hmm.
now we realize is much better than we thought.
True. True.
But lose to Washington State when they weren't ranked week
Hmm.
2, and everyone's like, we got way too excited about a first year head coach. Whatever. Forget about Wisconsin. They're still not ranked. They're 5-1. Like,
On the cusp. They have to be right. They're on the cusp, I think, for sure,
yes.
to get in that. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. This is exactly what you think of when you think of a bounce back team that lose week 2, everyone throws you away, and then all of a sudden, again, they got a big game this week with Iowa, who's 4-1, and then they've got a Big Ten schedule coming up. So while they're on the easier side of the Big Ten, it's not easy, and they do have Ohio State on there. But if they can win some of these games that they probably should, and
Hmm.
maybe lose the Ohio State game but win the rest, that's a 10-2 season, and that's going to the Big Ten championship game, and
Yep.
that's huge.
Exactly as we discussed. Yeah. Already, it's a very easy case to put Wisconsin in that up
Yeah,
there. Yep.
and then at number 1, a team you didn't even have on your list,
Okay.
I have the Utah Utes.
Wow. Okay. I guess I'm not really a big believer in Utah. I guess the Utes out there in not pro no, they are Provo. It's BYU's pro no, who is Provo? They are pro I think they're Provo. It's Provo and
No, BYU's Provo.
BYU is pro. I'm trying to think of that. Oh my god, where they are. Oh my god. Wherever you are in Utah. Okay. It's your shine. Go ahead.
What happened there? Um, no, yeah, Utah is, I think, still a really good team. We've seen we expected Cam Rising all year, and
Yeah.
we've seen
Yeah.
it not be Cam Rising and them not be bad. They have one tough loss against a good Pac-12 team. As we mentioned, this Pac-12 is just going to eat themselves alive all year. So I'm expecting most of them to lose in conference games. Also, Utah has a stat that not a lot of people like to talk about. I believe it's home night games in the last 10 years. Best record in the country. Better than LSU, better than Beaver Stadium, better than anywhere where it's tough to play at night. Utah. Loud, rowdy crowd, and they play at elevation, which is tough for some other teams coming in
Yeah.
there. It's yeah, I really think that they're right in that Pac-12 mix still, and no one's talking about them like they are. Even we're
Okay.
talking
Yeah.
about all
No.
these great Pac-12 teams, and we don't bring them up. And all they got to do is win a couple, and
Yeah. I mean, great. They have a great underrated head coach. They have. I mean, yeah, they're kind of always in it, so to speak. I mean, who was their loss to?
Oregon State,
Okay,
who's a
that's
really good team.
fair enough. Yeah. I guess maybe I'm overlooking them a bit for sure here. I guess I just don't. Yeah, they're just not in that hierarchy for me just yet. For I guess within that top 4 to 5, I guess Pac-12 teams, honestly, which they very much seem on track to just continue to prove me wrong. So I'm just giving you guys fuel out there in Utah, not Provo. I don't believe Provo, wherever you are in Utah. That definitely not Park City or Salt Lake City either. I don't. Man, this is gonna. It's gonna come to me at some point in this show. But yeah, no, that's a very solid list. I think it's a great. I mean, great choice for number one. With the rationale that you explained there. I mean, yeah, they very much because yeah, early season loss. They are knocking on the door of top 10
Yeah.
within the next couple weeks or so. So
And again, like I said about, I forget which one it was on your list, Tennessee, I said, they're going to have their spots to prove this.
yeah,
So we'll get to
and
see it
that's
play out because
yeah.
they've got big games coming up on the schedule.
And that's I think and that's ultimately a function of this exercise too is just all right bounce back in the sense that maybe they've already kind of showed some signs obviously for sure because they've had to show some
Yeah.
signs of life after an early loss but then also who we think has looking ahead a fighter's chance in some big games and that's I think the ultimate testament because you want to be especially in these top conferences you have to we think about bounce back I mean a good season is ultimately I think marked by good wins, not fluff, like a potential team I'm going to mention soon here, like that just got kind of their, handed to them against Georgia. But that's really good call on Utah there. I think I don't know. I'm just not a big Utah guy, but they're very much making, showing why they deserve to be in that top five for in terms of bounce back seasons. And number one, yeah, you're going. I guess that's funny. We didn't have neither of us had the others number one in their top five. So that's funny to look at that. But yeah. Any other comments you want to make on these? Either anything you said in relation to these bounce back teams, or any honorable mentions or anything, or before we head into the next segment?
No, I mean, I think you can look at, there were a lot of potential teams to put on this list. Obviously, anyone who has won early lost is a potential.
By the letter, yeah.
Yeah. But you look at, when I was looking at this, I was looking at who I think is good enough and has the path to do it. And so that's how I came up with my list. I'm sure yours was a similar process.
Yep. Really with an emphasis on the SEC.
Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, with that, we'll go into the Collins, Ballin, and Fallin segment here. I'm going to change it up a little bit I'm going to do one of each, from relative to, this past week of games that we just saw, past weekend, I should say, and then a little bit too of throw it in there. Okay. One of each for kind of predictive after in terms of what I think is going to shake up potentially this weekend, and who we might be very well saying that in our Monday show. Yep. So, all right, with that, look, I think it begins with the true Ballin. I think it really starts with, in my book, Noah Fifita, a freshman quarterback, going for 5 touchdowns, 300 yards. I mean, really, it's not a hot take at all. I mean, toe-to-toe with Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Got to an overtime scenario. And it's now to the point where, I mean, you mentioned your guy, Jaden DeLaura. There's some on the Twitter sphere. I mean, maybe it's not obviously Twitter, take it with a grain of salt, maybe not the most emblematic of a true population of a fan base, whatever, what have you. There's people that are calling for, he should just, in the event DeLaura, who, if he was healthy, I think Jed Fish said, if he's healthy, it's DeLaura, especially getting his revenge against, I guess, Washington State, his former team, all that stuff. There's a contingent, maybe minority. I'm not quite cued in as I'd maybe like to be. But
yeah, you haven't been on the Arizona message board.
No, not as much. But in every comment, it's like, why? Like, Fifita's earned it. Yeah. I mean, he showed out. I mean, really put, I think, Arizona, for me, back on the map. And look, they're a 3-3 team, but against the best player in the country and toe-to-toe. And I just got to give him, his praise for that performance.
The guy balled out.
Yep. True Ballin for this week. But this past week, I should say, week 6. My Fallin for week 6. Look, it's got to be Mark Stoops in the Kentucky program. And look, they wouldn't have maybe gotten on this list, this bad list, if you will, if they, in a lot of, I guess, scenarios, if on how that game could have gone. But, I mean, just as they were a top 25 team, got absolutely embarrassed. And for me, there's the element of, okay, it's the game where you kind of awoke a sleeping giant, really, in Georgia to kind of come out. But honestly, where it kind of manifests itself, for me, classifying Mark Stoops and that program as Fallin, it's really more, I guess, leaning on Stoops because of his comments and kind of the way he handled it, in the aftermath. There's ways to kind of, in my view, kind of be, I guess, not sportsmanship, but just kind of be almost like self-respecting. Lose with grace and kind of just being self-respectful in a way and not do what he did and basically, critique and criticize, Georgia, they buy players, this, that, the other. Yeah. I mean, look, we all know how, the NIL transfer landscape, all that plays in and how it plays a big role, especially for these big programs. But you you got to hold your peace there in my book, especially in the setting of a post game, conference, and what you say directly to when posed the question. Got to handle, like, use the word, got to handle yourself with a little bit more grace. And then really where I kind of go with it too is, you kind of put your players in a bad spot of like, oh, that's Georgia. Like, oh, our guys kind of still, like, we never had a chance. Oh, it's like Kentucky, we're just Kentucky. Like, what does that do for your own locker room?
It was almost a way of him saying, like, yeah, of course all my guys stink compared to his guys because they got more money. And if I was on the team, I'd be saying, what do you mean?
Yeah, like, come on, coach, what are you doing? And it's, just as bad as it could have really gone for Kentucky, it happened. So they're my fallen of the week. And then now predicting. My ballin for when we look back on this past week, and it's sort of weak, but I got to go Caleb Williams here. Look, I think we talked about, they've along, I guess, similar boat, kind of. I want to be very careful here. We looked at Georgia and how they maybe didn't, come out guns blazing as we maybe thought they would, in early season play. Mm-hmm. Especially, USC still is in that boat. They just haven't. They have it's the Caleb Williams show, and who else, right? And when I look at, they're going to South Bend now, and maybe it's partly influenced me by Notre Dame. Fool me once, kind of shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I just like USC's chances. We'll get into that game. It's a very interesting line, to say the least. Really almost like a trap line. I don't even know. It's very confusing, but ultimately when I think about it, I believe in Caleb Williams to go in the hostile territory, pull out a win. And we've talked about it. You mentioned as much too with respect to Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. Even as bad as USC's defense is, Notre Dame's offense has been underwhelming as well.
They're not scoring a lot of points.
No. And so that's who I am, Caleb Williams, to go in there and get a marquee win, and really, I think, kind of almost re-announce himself in terms of maybe the fatigue of the Heisman race as the reigning winner, and with how good, obviously, but we'll see what happens with his counterparts with Nix and Penix. So potentially one of those two might just really cement themselves, though. But I think Caleb Williams, my prediction for really balling this weekend in South Bend, not Big Bend, like I said before, but. Yeah, Caleb Williams is my guy there. And then my fallen, another team we've talked about before already, maybe in the trending down direction, I got to go with Arkansas. I think it's not going to bode too well for them this weekend, and really, really might just set things off, if it's even possible, down there in Fayetteville, even into further kind of...
we're still on the Sam Pittman hot seat watch, is what you're saying, and
we're just still on the
how
hot seat.
That seat can possibly get before they finally pull the plug.
Yep, no, definitely, and I think it's really heating up right now.
Yeah,
and I think almost in certain respects, it's like they can kind of fall back. I'm just thinking in terms of the AD there, that administration down there. It's almost like a weak excuse to be like, okay, well, we just played Alabama, and just not what we want, or not. We can't against any opponent. We'll see what don't see things going too well for Arkansas this weekend, just to say the least. But those are my Ballin and Fallins. Now all that's left to do is get into this incredible slate.
This
week 7.
Week 7 slate. Yeah. Great slate.
No pun intended, packed. But all right, Colin, I'll let you lead things off here with getting into some games.
But I think we'll probably just go right down the line, and the first 2 or 3 ranked matchups I think are real easy to talk about. We could probably talk about all 3 at the same time, basically.
Yeah, we can. 3 birds, 1 stone. Yep.
Georgia's taking on Vandy. Michigan's got Indiana. Ohio State's got Purdue. Do you see any of these games even being kind of interesting?
If I had to pick out of the 3, I kind of think Indiana might. It could be. I could see like a first quarter, first half. Kind of keeping it semi-interesting, and they're not down and out within the first like 4 minutes of the game in terms of what in
Hmm.
terms of that respect. But yeah, I mean, I just see, look, we're talking line wise 32.5 for Georgia, 33.5 for Michigan, 19 for OSU. It's just, yeah, I think especially Ohio State, maybe they would have been vulnerable before, but we just saw them against a very good Maryland team. Things were kind of close, but then they really
Hmm.
kind of separated themselves. 20 points right on the dot in that, in terms of
Yeah.
covering last week. But yeah, I mean, it's a little weird given how large the spreads are. I mean, I guess if I had to pick, yeah, like I said, I guess Indiana would be maybe my pick as a potential cover,
Hmm.
as cover confidence, but that's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I were setting the lines on these, I think I'd have Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State all about 90 million point favorites. I mean, I can't see any of these being a game. Purdue was, I guess, the one team out of this group that I thought could do something this year. I really liked Hudson Card in his limited appearances at Texas,
Yeah,
and it has just not been good at Purdue.
no,
So
no.
yeah, I don't see I don't see any of those three games being close, but that's good because we might have a little slow start to the afternoon, but we have a great late afternoon and night of football coming up on
Oh yeah,
Saturday.
yeah, saving the best for later.
Yep.
So, with that, we'll go transition into the ACC here. We got Syracuse and Florida State. Florida State being one of my top four current best teams in the
Hmm.
country. We're talking at Florida State here.
Hmm.
I think they kind of roll. We talked about, I think you actually mentioned last show with Syracuse, kind of in a similar, I think, vein as Kentucky, where good kind of start, but then it might just go downhill really quick.
Yeah.
And I think Syracuse, sorry, but I don't see it really happening against Florida State down in Tallahassee.
Yeah. Now I do think the Cuse is building something. I like Garrett Trader, quarterback. Dino
Yeah,
Babers has been a steady hand at Syracuse, I'll say. It hasn't been amazing. It's not like they're, ending every season in the top 25 or anything, but they've had some big wins. They've started to get some players in the program, and so it feels like things are going in the right direction. There's been a little bit of an offensive pop early in the season. I also don't see it against Florida State though. I think this is probably the third in a row, like come down to earth game for Syracuse.
which again, it's a product of playing in a very strong ACC.
Yeah.
And it's, what can you do? You just got to play what's in front of you. And it's a tough slate for the ACC, for a lot of ACC teams this season. Arkansas against Bama, we kind of just alluded to that. I think Arkansas is going to be my kind of fallen and potential, change in program with a potential maybe firing
Hmm.
on the horizon. I just think, and we both had Bama within our bounce back. I mean, I'm curious to see here. I think I know you're leading, but I think it's going to be a Bama route at home. Um,
Yeah. I mean, with KJ Jefferson, Arkansas has actually given Bama a little bit of trouble in recent history.
True.
I wouldn't be shocked if they cover this game. I just don't see the route for them to win.
Okay.
But I'm not going to bet this game. I think if I were, I might take 19.5 with Arkansas because Alabama, as good as they've been, they're still not like putting up 40 points every week like we're used to. And
Sure.
so could I see Arkansas scoring a couple times and just keeping it within that 20-point number? Sure.
Okay.
I don't see it being a competitive game in the fourth quarter though.
Okay. Fair. Out west, your Utes, I guess your number one bounce back against Cal.
Yeah.
I'll let you. What do you think? How do you see that one playing out?
Yeah, I think Cal wins easy. No, yeah, I mean, I like the Utes, obviously. I mean, Cal's a team that is actually like, they're almost like a throwback to what the Pac 12 has been recently,
Hmm.
where you score a lot of points, but you give up a ton of points and you lose 40 to 50 or whatever. Uh, so Utah might have to play that game. I think if they have to, they'll be able to. I could also see just their defense being stout enough that Cal doesn't get to play that game.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think either way, I think game script could be vastly different depending on who kind of sets the pace of play. I
Sure.
think either one of those game scripts, Utah wins handily though.
Okay. maybe we did a little bit slight deviation here. Yeah, I mean, talk about game script. I mean, with Jaden Ott, I think maybe we're just, and with Utah's, similarly, I guess, to how maybe you described Bama with, not the most potent offense
Hmm.
necessarily, especially with, no Cam Rising
Yeah.
at quarterback. And, even in the event, when he does, assuming he does come back at some point, it's like just hard for me to see, anywhere close to the, I guess, top tier of Pac-12, offensive play. And so
Hmm.
I think 11 is an interesting line. I think Cal maybe keeps it at like a 10 point. So I kind of lean Cal to cover that,
Hmm.
but I just don't, I mean, yeah, Cal just doesn't have any
Yeah. I
firepower.
mean, I think you're right. If it becomes a run and shoot type of game, then I agree. Utah probably, if Cal can score all those points, I still think Utah wins because Cal's defense is no good and Utah's offense, I don't think is that anemic. But they probably don't pull away big if it's one
No,
of those crazy shootouts.
but I guess to clarify, I don't necessarily think it's going to be a crazy shootout. I just think
Yeah.
it's going to be like Utah doesn't score like enough. I could honestly see it being like a 20-10 type game, honestly.
I
Which,
think that would favor Utah a lot if it were to stay in the lower numbers.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's just as they could look totally dominant, but it's just like, oh, a backdoor cover for Cal. I could see that on a field goal or a late touchdown.
Hmm.
But all right, I think really quick game to get through. UMass against Penn State, one of your top teams in the
Yeah.
country.
Um, that being said, I won't bet this game because Penn State's just so much better than UMass. But I think if I had to pick a side, I would take UMass on the thought that
Huge point
it's
lay.
such a big number,
Yeah,
and Penn State might just come out sleepwalking because I can't imagine trying to get those guys in the Penn State locker room up for the UMass
off
game.
of a bye,
Yeah.
like just to, yeah,
Whereas UMass, this is,
their game.
oh yeah, I mean, they're calling everyone they know from whatever school they grew up in high school saying, we're going to be on TV this week,
Yeah. Oh, like getting as many tickets as they can to get
Yeah.
local.
So,
Yeah.
no disrespect to UMass, of
No,
course, but
no. The Minutemen, good lacrosse, good hockey, but football, not quite.
at one time good at basketball. Of
True.
course, it was when Calipari was cheating, but
Yeah. Yeah, but
all right. And now we are into the game of the slate. The one everyone wants to talk about, the one that I cannot wait to watch. I am
yeah.
so excited for this game.
Yeah. I mean, I think really game of the year. I
To
think
this point, certainly.
yeah, to this point, but even if I had to go out on a limb, I think looking back, like even, kind of interesting, kind of like, middle to back half part of the season. But
Mm-hmm.
when I just look at matchups wise, from obviously we just had Texas and Oklahoma, but from an entertainment value, I mean, this is my early call for game of the year here. And it's so, look, I don't know about you, Con, but I can't really, it's been so difficult for me to kind of pick a side here. And, it's obviously it's Washington at home.
Yeah.
And we have, Washington's obviously, that 3-point favorite. So it kind of speaks to inherently, okay, they get the 3-point favorite in a neutral site. It's
A
like a
neutral site,
pick 'em.
that's a pick 'em,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's like really, really incredible matchup. And especially with that Washington at home perspective, I think maybe neutrally, I would kind of lean Oregon because of their defense.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that Washington offense, I mean, we're talking unbelievable firepower. I'll put you on the spot here, Con. You pick your side first. I kind of have, I don't know. I still can't really make up my mind here, but I do have a different play, so to speak. But
Colin, I can't sleep at night because of
yeah,
this game. I can't pick a
yeah,
side on the thing.
no, it's
As soon as I think I got it figured out, I go, wait, but what about this? And
yeah,
I mean, you're right. That Washington offense is so electric that it's almost impossible to ever pick against them.
hmm
That being said, I think there's a chance that when we're watching the game play out, we go, oh yeah, Oregon's defense is probably the class of the Pac-12 defensively.
hmm
And look at what Oregon's offense has been able to do. They're not Washington's offense, but they are not far off.
not far off at
And
all. Yeah,
so if I had to pick a side, I think I'm leaning Oregon, but I could also see Washington just not punting all day, just scoring on every single drive because their offense is that good.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, to put you on the spot there, it's like to me now, it's like, okay, so you were Oregon. I was kind of Oregon, but for me, it's almost like I'm trying to like self fade what my if I think one way, okay, that means just go the other way. So hey, maybe this is I'm calling potential game of the year here. Maybe this is potential gut off of the year. Gut, you just shared, Oregon. I guess gut. Washington, that home edge. I got to go Washington, and also gut off of the year game here. Con on Oregon, I'm on Washington here, but I think we'll get into it. I do have a play in this game. I think obviously then that speaks to over under related for one of my best bets. So we'll touch on that soon enough. Let's wrap through the rest of the top 25 and maybe some other notable games here. But
I also just want to touch on with that one. You know me, always got multiple screens so I can watch multiple
yeah,
games at once. Got to be locked in all
okay.
all Saturday. I think at 3:30 I might just go one screen and just lock in because
Yeah.
I don't know the last time I was this excited for a regular
I feel like you
season
got to
game.
watch every snap.
It
Yeah.
feels like the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's a Week 7 regular season college game. I mean,
It just again speaks to how incredible the Pac-12 has been this season.
yeah,
And to at this point, extremely proven journeyman, like just such great narratives and storylines heading into this game.
yeah,
Yeah.
almost
I,
very similar storylines.
yeah, no,
in
exactly.
the way that
Yeah.
Penix and Nix,
Uh-huh.
started at their first schools respectively, and
Yep.
started shaky, but with flashes of greatness. But then with at other times the home fans hating their guts and
Yep.
everything else, and then showing up, getting this rebirth in the Pac-12, and now both in their fifth year, I believe, too. And
Yep. Battle tested.
yeah,
To say the least. Yep.
it's really something, and both Heisman candidates. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, on that exact note, I guess the winner. Because look, just a little hint here. I don't see it being a defensive stalemate.
No.
And I think what we're going to see here is so the from the winner in terms of the winning quarterback, really an inside track to the Heisman,
yeah.
and then the winning team, I think, really inside track to the top four and
Yeah.
the playoff. Quite honestly.
Yeah, and when you're talking about Heisman moments and building a Heisman resume, I mean, I feel like there's a pretty good shot that one of these two quarterbacks gets the ball with like a minute left, and they say you got to go down and score to win the game.
Yeah.
And that's the type of thing that makes a Heisman. So
Oh, 100%.
yeah, I can't wait to watch.
100% here. And then I'll segue into here now. This game has another one of my best bets we'll get into shortly in terms of the A&M at Tennessee. Tennessee was one of my bounce backs. I like Tennessee. I'll just leave it as that. I think Tennessee, look, A&M's a team I'm not really the biggest believer in, to put it that way, and I do believe in Tennessee. That home field advantage, 3 points to me is a little bit suspect of a line. I think too little, to be honest, for Tennessee at home.
Yeah, Neyland's a tough place to come in and play. Everybody seems to get a little rattled there. It's one of the louder SEC stadiums.
Yep.
They still, obviously, everyone who's in that stadium will have not given up on Tennessee. So it'll be loud, it'll be raucous. A&M coming off a heartbreaking loss in a game that they probably feel like they could have or should have won against Alabama with the backup quarterback, like we said. I think A&M maybe is the better team still, but I think the spot, just everything lends itself to Tennessee. So, yeah, I'd be on Tennessee's side of this one.
Sounds good. I know one of your bounce back teams. We got the Jayhawks here. Kansas going to Stillwater. How do you see that one playing out?
Yeah, I mean, this is going into this season. Oklahoma State had, I believe, their worst recruiting class under the Mike Gundy era. Also, their worst retention of the amount of 4 and 5 stars left on the team in the Mike Gundy era. I don't know what the root or the causes of that were. I don't know if it's an NIL thing or whatever, but I know that there was a lot of talk that this is going to be the worst Oklahoma State team we've seen in a while, and we've been used to them being one of the best teams in the Pac-12. I mean, in the Big 12 every
Yeah,
single
always
year.
solid. Yeah, yeah.
Always a good program,
Hmm.
and never quite in that college football playoff mix, but it seemed like always in that next tier, always in the 7 to 20th best team in the
Sure.
country at the end of the season. This year, I mean, I got it written down here as abbreviated as OK State, and that's what they are. They are OK. They're,
Yeah,
they'll
yeah.
probably go 6-6 or something. They just
Hmm.
aren't. They're not a team that inspires a lot of fear. I'm pretty high on Kansas, so I've got Kansas here. It's actually one of my best bets. We'll get into that later, but I got Kansas.
Okay. Yeah, I like Kansas too. I
Mhm.
like they were the gut off pick for me in last weekend. I just think Kansas is a good. They have something cooking. Speaking of coaches, I mean, really good coach team. Probably not going to have their coach for long, not too long. But
Yeah,
Louisville Pitt, interesting match. I think this is maybe a bit of a trap for Louisville. I think if I had to go cover, so we're at Pitt. I think Pitt keeps it at a one possession game. I'm not quite confident. This is not quite as far to say they win and get the upset, but I just see this being a close game. The 7.5, of course, that's right on the line of one possession game, so maybe it's a 21-13
hmm
Louisville covers, but I'm just gonna have to lean Pitt here to cover the 7.5 points.
yeah. I think it's a bad combination of things for Louisville. I think it's a trap game mixed with a letdown spot because they're coming off the highest of
Yeah,
emotional
no,
highs. I once had a guy tell me who played pretty high level Division 1 college football. He said, "Forget about the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world. They know how to win. They know what to do. But the teams like Louisville, who no one on this roster has ever won a game that big in their life, he said,
hmm
they are susceptible to. Obviously, depends on the kids, depends on the coaches, depends on the atmosphere of the
yeah,
school,
sure,
but they're susceptible to practice hungover all week because they're still partying from the Notre Dame win. That's a thing that happens on college campuses.
yeah,
Non-football players were partying all week about that game, and who's to say that some guys on the team were or weren't? I don't know, but that was an interesting tidbit I'd never heard of before from a
okay,
guy who had played in games like that who said, "Yeah, never forget that they're still college kids."
yeah,
Um,
and yeah, it might just take one too. You never know if it's just in one impact player for Louisville. You never know.
yeah. So yeah, 7.5 feels like a small number. It feels like it should be bigger, but
Yeah,
I still, again, I that's probably not a game I'm gonna bet. But if I would, I'd be on Pitt as well.
okay, yeah, just don't.
Not to win,
You don't
but
feel great. Just you don't feel too great about
I
the
don't.
pick, and yeah,
Yeah, I don't know how you could feel great about picking Louisville this
or
week, just
yeah,
based on the spot, not based
yeah,
off the team. Very
yeah.
good team, but
Hmm. Or even with Pitt, for me, it's like obviously because Pitt's been a bit disappointing, 1-4, kind of at the bottom there of that conference. But I just think similarly, not to disrespect Pitt, but this idea of the UMass Minutemen in terms of being up for a game. I think
yeah,
Pitt is up for this game and they give it their all and
yeah.
keep it
I
close.
mean, this is their shot to
Yeah.
punch somebody in the mouth.
Yep.
Their season is over at this
Yeah.
point,
No.
essentially,
Yeah.
but this is their shot to do something big.
For
So,
sure. For sure. And I see them giving Louisville a run for their money here. So going back to the Pac-12, Arizona, Washington State, 7.5 point line for the Cougs at home here. I'll keep it short and sweet. I think it's a bounce back for Wazoo. I think it's a bounce back for Wazoo, and especially if Delora kind of usurps Fafita. I don't know. Speaking of maybe locker room, just kind of maybe a little bit of, oh yeah, the redemption or the revenge story for Delora potentially. But for me, just kind of, taking the reins out of Fafita after how he just played. I don't know maybe how that gels with the locker room, but I mean, obviously the coach knows his locker room, but I
mhm.
don't know. I just don't not loving. Excuse me, not loving Arizona here, but.
Yeah, we've talked about it. I've got the future on Arizona,
Mhm.
and on their wins total, not for them to do anything crazy before.
Mhm.
um, but this is one I had circled as a winnable game, and I still do. It is a revenge game if Delora plays. I think he really doesn't like Washington State. I don't think it's just his old school. I think it's a place that he feels like he was screwed over and
Just kind of forced out of town.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah, which it's a powerful motivator. One of
yeah,
the best out
and
there.
we've
But
seen Arizona. They've been frisky in every game, and
yeah,
obviously very frisky last week. So it's not just a quarterback situation. I think probably the team as a whole is better than people think. That being
yeah,
said, it's a natural bounce back spot for Washington State.
which I lean more
Yeah,
toward.
that
Yeah.
is the thing that scares me the most. I'll be rooting for Arizona, although I do not think they'll win. And the reason I don't think they'll win, like I said, the thing that scares me is it's such a natural bounce back spot.
Yep. So, all right, Auburn against LSU here. LSU 11-point favorites at home. How do you see this one playing out?
I, for one, can't believe that the best team in the country is only an 11-point favorite against Auburn.
Best team in the country. I don't think we're talking about Georgia, are we? But
No, I mean, yeah, I'll let you take the reins on this one. You're the LSU guy.
yeah, I just think LSU. Look, I'm maybe even not quite at a point where I don't know. Maybe their defense allows too many points this game, where it's you know a 10-point game. So 10 points means Auburn covers, but I like LSU at home here to walk out with a win. I just don't think Auburn really has anything close to the level of firepower to compete with. And
Mhm.
look, no one's really stopping LSU. So, look, Auburn could have their best game this season and still lose by 10. I mean, easily. I just don't see. LSU. It's an easy win for me.
Yeah.
But
I think this is a spot where when you're a new coach in a conference as tough as the SEC, you have to do something. Auburn's not gonna make any waves this year nationally, but this could be a marquee win for them.
yeah,
And Hugh Freeze is a very good coach. He's not a very good person,
I was gonna.
but
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say I'm not. Yeah, I mean,
no, he is a very good football coach, and he knows what it takes to win in the SEC. He's done it before, and I could see this being a spot where he really gets the guys up and says, "This is our spot to make our mark, to stamp Auburn onto the map, and say." We're here. We're on our way back. We're not going to do it this year, but just like Deion said in his press conference, after
yeah.
they lost to Oregon, said, "Get
Hmm.
us now because we're only going to get better and better." I think this is a spot where they could do that. And as you know, I'm just not in love with this LSU team. So, yeah, I think if I'm playing this one way, I'm playing Auburn.
Hmm. All right. Okay. USC versus Notre Dame. I said it before. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. USC.
What if they fool you 3 times?
I'll just retire from the show. I got to go with USC as my best bet. USC money line going in there to Notre Dame and South Bend getting a win. I just believe in them far more than I do in Notre Dame at this point. And yeah, I'm not going to let Notre Dame fool me. A second time here, I got to go with USC. One of my best bets. What do you think?
Give me Notre Dame all day. I just
Really?
the one thing that scares me is, as we've talked about, USC keeps playing in these high scoring games where they have to outscore the other team.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is not the most difficult team in the country to outscore. While they should have this potent offense we've talked about, they haven't really. They've been playing close, low scoring games. That being said, they've put some really good offenses on ice this year. And if they can do that to USC, they're not going to have to score all that many points to win, and you can score on that USC defense with ease.
Sure.
So I think it's really, what unit are you betting on, USC's offense or Notre Dame's defense? Because nobody's betting on USC's defense and nobody's betting on Notre Dame's offense.
No, exactly.
But
And I fall on the USC offense side.
yep,
So,
and that's where we have a split, and we'll see.
mm-hmm.
All
I'll let
right.
you take this one. Oh,
Yeah, Miami trying to bounce back off of what many are now calling the worst loss in college football history, against a really good UNC team. call me crazy, say I'm delusional, say I'm just
Hopium, some hope.
oh my god, it's like I'm just saying, hey, punch me in the face one more time. I want to see if it hurts this time. But I think Miami's the better team. I think Miami, everyone has hiccups. I think last week was a hiccup. It should have been a close win.
Yeah.
Obviously, the loss makes it way more than just a hiccup. But when you play out that game the way that it should have ended, just kneel the ball, you win the game. It's a hiccup in a look ahead spot when they're looking ahead to this big game, and coming off of a big win over A&M, and so it if you play that out the way that it should have ended, and it's a 2017 Miami win, I'd be supremely confident here. The thing that scares me is there were shots of Miami players on the sideline saying, "What the f are we doing?" after they fumbled the football, and so is there dissension between the coach and the players? Is how is the locker room going to rally against what happened last week, or are they going to roll over and die and lose 5 more games? That remains to be seen. I really could see that going either way. But I think if they use it as a rallying cry, if they say, hey, we're way better than what just happened, and we get a chance this week against a great team to go out and show it, I think Miami has a chance to win. I'm gonna bet Miami. I'm probably gonna bet an alternate line where Miami's like given points. I'm that confident. But
Okay.
this is, like I said, I'm just on the same merry-go-round.
Which is understandable, but I guess I'm not with you. I
Yeah.
think with Tez Walker back, I think North Carolina. I think it could be. I think UNC covers here at home. I think I see it as like a touchdown game. I just think Drake May is going to be too much. Although a very good defense, a very good Miami defense, but I just don't see Miami walking out with a win. But all right, we're getting a little bit late in here, but quickly going through the top 25 slate here. Mizzou at Kentucky. Look, I mentioned them in my Fallen. I just don't like Kentucky right now. I like Mizzou in this matchup.
Yeah. Now, this is, as we talked about, a bounce back spot earlier with Washington State. It's a big bounce back spot for Kentucky. I think
Potentially.
even more so than Mizzou. They obviously were both ranked last week, both lost ranked matchups last week.
Yeah.
But the way that Kentucky got embarrassed, they could do the same thing I was saying with Miami, kind of use that as a rallying cry and say, that'll never happen to us again. We're better. We're going to go out and show it. That being said, I think Missouri's a better team, a more disciplined team. Missouri would not have lost by that many points to Georgia, I don't believe.
No, they've given Georgia fits, and even when they were
last
in their
season,
heydays. Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, I got Mizzou there.
Yeah, I just think Luther Burden will be too much for that defense. UCLA, Oregon State. I've really wrestled with this one, but look, I think I got to go with UCLA. I think it's going to be a really potential statement win to kind of truly catapult, I guess, their bounce back status. I had them in, but I just think that UCLA defense is going to be able to get pressure on DJU with some of the best edge rushers in the country. And I don't love it, but I just like UCLA here to go in there and get a big time win.
Yeah. This game is the reason UCLA was not on my bounce back teams, because I think they lose this week.
Okay.
I think that Oregon State offense is potent. UCLA has struggled a bit with, getting outscored, basically, not losing the game because they play worse, but just letting up too many points. And like you said, they do have great edge rushers, but edge rushers come off the edge. That's why they call them that, obviously. Damian Martinez can gash anybody in the country up the middle. It basically, Oregon State never starts a series off schedule because it's 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4, because on first down you just give it to the workhorse and let him get you to 2nd and short. I wouldn't be shocked, obviously, if UCLA won this game. UCLA is a very good team. Moore has looked better each week, I've felt like.
Yeah.
So, it'll be an interesting, fun game to watch.
For sure.
But I'm on Oregon State.
Okay. NC State Duke, one of your bounce back teams as well there with Duke. At Duke, 3 points. sort of a trap line. It's funny, I was having this conversation, with my dad last night, but it's a very odd line, but it almost makes you think how is Duke only 3 points? It's almost like maybe trapping you to maybe think and consider NC State here, but I'm going Duke to cover that -3.
Yeah, it's a strange line. I've seen a lot of people saying bet NC State just on that line.
Yeah, weird. Yeah,
The line definitely points NC State. I just think, and also, we're still not sure about the health of a couple Duke players.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's a big. You could see a big swing there, but I got Duke regardless.
All right. Any other notable games, Con, you wanted to
Yeah, I got
touch
four
on?
non-ranked matchups I think are worth talking
Okay, yeah,
about.
let's rattle them through.
One, neither of these teams I think is great this year, but they're
Okay.
both worth talking about. They're both always nationally relevant. One's particularly relevant to you. Florida, South Carolina. What do you got?
Yeah, so talking about bad SEC defenses, the Gamecocks here, we are just abysmal in terms of a pass defense. But you know, Graham Mertz and Ricky Pearsall, I'm not the biggest believers in, and I'm not a huge Napier guy either. I call it some fandom hopium here, but I'm going with South Carolina to get the W here.
I don't think it's hopium. They're favored in this game actually.
Yeah,
Uh,
couple
y-
points.
yeah,
Yeah,
I got South Carolina as well. I just never want to see this Florida team play again. I mean,
yeah, it's bad. It's
it's
bad.
it's sad almost. I say that
Sad.
as a
Yeah.
Miami fan. I've rooted against Florida my whole life, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not great down in
Nope.
Gainesville.
Nope. Nope. Nope.
All right, I got Wisconsin, Iowa. 5-1 Wisconsin taking on 4-1 Iowa. Two of the best, probably the two best Big Ten teams who aren't ranked, but are both on the cusp of being ranked. What do you got here?
It's maybe a stigma for me. I just can't. I just can't go with Iowa. I got to go with Wisconsin in this one. Simple as for me. It's pretty weak explanation, but I just don't like Iowa.
Yeah, no, I think this Iowa team is better than people realize because they got blown out by Penn State. I don't think they're good enough to, which is why I didn't have them on my bounce back list. But
Yeah.
I think they are better than people realize. So I could see this being a tough game for Wisconsin. I do have it being Wisconsin. One really dumb thought, but actually maybe not that dumb thought I had was let's just say you're in the fourth quarter of this game.
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin is up 45-10.
Mm-hmm.
Do you start letting Iowa score? Because we all know everyone's talking about the Brian Ferentz rule. If he doesn't average 25 points a game, he gets fired. The Iowa's offensive coordinator. But don't you kind of want him to keep his job if you're another Big Ten school?
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah. Some courtesy. Oh no, we just fumbled it. Oh no, you have first and goal
Yeah.
in the last minute to get to. Yeah, no, that's a good
If
point.
I were in the Big Ten, I would
Sneaky.
want Brian Ferentz calling that offense as long as possible.
Yeah, good point there. Good point. I mean, just Iowa offense. My goodness. What other? Okay, quickly rattle them through those last two games.
Yep.
Recap our best bets, then we're out of here.
All right, Kansas State, Texas Tech. Two teams that had a lot of preseason hype. They're both 3-2 right now. I believe Texas
Yes.
Tech's a one and
Yeah.
a half point favorite in this
At
game.
home. Yeah.
What do you got?
I was leaning, and I kind of like Will Howard and kind of local
Yeah.
to us in the greater Philadelphia area, but he. I like Will Howard. I like K State, but I guess I gotta kind of go gut flip here. I'm going with Texas Tech at home. Yeah, taking care of business there.
I'm right there with you. I also, Kansas State's one of these teams I keep talking myself into, and then I
Yeah.
watch them play and go, it's not what it was last year. It's just not that good. And
No, I mean they had a chance. I mean it was brutal. Missouri's kind of really announcement a
mhm.
60-plus yard game-winning field
Yeah.
goal. I think that just kind of really took the wind out of Kansas State's sails at the time, a top 20 team, but just kind of a little bit on a downhill trajectory. Still a good program, but I just don't see it happening against Texas Tech. Just a weird matchup for me to choose, but I got to go with Tech here.
Yep. And then finally, Wyoming Air Force. We talked about Wyoming last week. Had that nice call on that win. That was great. Now Wyoming is one of the better group of 5 teams in the country,
if not the best. Yeah.
And they're still an 11-point dog here because Air Force has. We talk about Washington's offense. Air Force might have the best offense in the country. All Air Force does is score the ball. It's like I don't even know what I'm watching anymore. You grew up on Air Force was running that triple option like every other military academy. They were winning games like 13-10, and now they're throwing the ball all over the field. They're scoring at will. There might not be a cap on how good this team is. I'm telling you, this is a team we're going to see in my opinion, we will see being ranked at some point this year. Okay. Yeah.
I still got to go with darling of the show, Wyoming here to cover the 11. I think that's got to be my choice. But what's your take on that?
I like Wyoming to cover the 11 too, but they are coming off a big emotional win against the top 25 program, which
potential susceptibility that you mentioned earlier in the show
very often.
Yep.
And I'll just never bet against this Air Force team. I can't believe how electric they are.
Fair enough. Yeah, you gotta respect the service, the armed forces, and Air Force there. But all right, those are our recap of this weekend's slate here. We'll recap our best bets here. Con, you go first. Your best bets.
All right, and just for anyone keeping with the season-long standings, I'm 2-1 in best bets. Colin, I can't remember, what was that record you had?
Haven't won, so only lost, but I'd rather lose it all than go like 1 or 2 for 3.
Disagree. As a guy who went 2 for 3 last week, I'd rather go 2 for 3 than 0-3. But
it's a potential easy route. You just got to fade me. That's how it's trending.
Yeah, that's true. The fade guy. Just do the opposite of whatever he says, and you'll win money. Of course, now that I've made fun of him, I will be going 0-3 this week. That's how it works. But we talked about this game, so I won't spend much time on it. First best bet, I got Kansas -3 at Oklahoma State.
Okay.
The only thing that scares me is I can't see how this is only a 3-point line. Feels like it should be bigger. Feels like maybe I'm missing something. I don't think I am, so I'm taking Kansas.
Okay.
Given the points. My next best bet, talked about this one again. I got Miami. For the purposes of this show and giving out, even money picks, I got them getting 3 points. Okay. I will tease this line to probably a dangerous number.
Okay.
I'm far too confident in this team, especially given how much they ripped my heart out last week.
Sure.
But that's my second best bet. And then my third, and I think my most level-headed pick that is purely coming from an objective standpoint. I got Hawaii getting 6 against San Diego State on the Big Island. Hawaii, it's always tough to play them there.
Sure.
It's a weird sleep delay thing for teams going that direction. But also, just Hawaii has one of the better home field advantages that no one talks about. Hawaiians show out, especially this season with all the tragedy that's happened in Hawaii. There's a real rally behind that team. Timmy Chang is turning that program around, certainly.
Okay.
I really like the quarterback. San Diego State's coming off 4 straight losses here, and they're a 6-point favorite. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, it's 4 losses against good programs. I do want to get that out there, so it's not like they're 4 random losses.
No, fair enough.
Hawaii's offensive stats this year have been way better than San Diego State's. They have the home field advantage. They're playing on the island. I don't know how they're a 6-point dog, so I'm gonna ride that.
Okay, cool. So those are your 3. Mm-hmm. I'm going. So I kind of hinted at mine before, throughout the show here. So I'm going USC money line, banking on Caleb Williams and that USC offense at Notre Dame. I have Tennessee covering 3 at home against A&M, just like that, just like the momentum of Tennessee compared to A&M, and then doing the first here, one of my best bets, close to we'll just say it goes far. More to lock here, my first lock. I'm true mortal lock. We're going with the over 67. Oregon, Washington, shootout in Seattle, I believe Seattle. Shootout there, I'm banking on Bo and Michael. I think the winning team. I think it's a one-score game, kind of
Mhm.
close shootout. I think the winning team is gonna have to get to around 38 and 1 point game or one possession game. That means I see basically the other team, both teams really getting above into the 30s. Obviously, that's what
Mhm.
this line implies. But I think over 67, lock it in, Oregon, Washington.
All right. Yeah, I love it. I can totally see that game being that big.
Yep.
So yeah,
That'll be this week, week 7 preview. Any last thoughts, Con?
yeah. As always, I'm Nick Saban. He's Dabo Sweeney, and that's the
Nope,
episode.
not Dabo. See you guys.